Oh Lord, help me to walk another mile, just one more mile. I'm tired of walking all alone. And Lord, help me to smile, another smile, just one more smile. Don't think I can do things on my own. I never thought I needed help before. I thought that I could get by myself. But now I know I just can't take it anymore. And with a humble heart on bended knee, begging you please for help.
The idea for the World Trade Center first arose in 1943, when people realized that New York City's prominence in the world needed to be revitalized. The World Trade Center would be used to stimulate urban renewal. After multiple delays, New York State Legislature passed a bill which allowed the governor of New York City, Thomas Dewey, to begin planning the project. David Rockefeller made the suggestion that the Port Authority construct the World Trade Center in Lower Manhattan. Plans of the World Trade Center were first made public in 1961, and the lead architect for the project was finally chosen on September 20th, 1962. Minoru Yamasaki is widely regarded as one of the most prominent architects of the 20th century. Other notable works of his, besides the World Trade Center, include the Pacific Science Center, the Rainier Tower, as well as the former Pruitt-Igoe houses. Yamasaki is the one who originally came up with the idea of having twin towers, although his initial plans called for the towers to be only 80 stories tall. Due to the Port Authority's goal of having 10 million square feet of office space, they required the towers be 110 stories tall. One major factor that had to be considered during the planning and construction of the twin towers was its elevators. The taller a building is, the more elevators it needs to service the numerous floors. Considering the sheer size of the Twin Towers, a traditional elevator system would not work, simply because it would have taken up too much space. Sky lobbies would increase workspace on each floor from 62 to 75% by minimizing the number of elevator shafts. Express elevators went to the 44th and 78th floors of the towers, and from there you would switch to an elevator designated to a certain section of floors. This system was inspired by the subways that run through New York. Yamasaki's plans were finally unveiled to the public on January 18, 1964, over 1 year after he was first assigned to the job. An interesting design choice for the buildings was its windows. From even a fairly close distance, the exteriors of the Twin Towers appeared to be completely metal. In actuality, the towers had over 12,000 windows, but due to Yamasaki's fear of heights and his desire to make the tower's occupants feel safe, he only made the windows 18 inches wide. The Twin Towers wouldn't stand alone. The plans for the World Trade Center included 4 other buildings, though they were much smaller in stature and far less iconic. All 4 of them were built in the early 1970s. A 7th addition to the World Trade Center was added in the 1980s, standing at 47 stories tall. The project would require 13 square blocks to be cleared, and demolition began on March 21, 1966. Demolition meant the total destruction of Radio Row. Radio Row was home to hundreds of residents, property owners, and small businesses. Many of the small businesses that were being affected actually took their fight to the United States Supreme Court in the form of an injunction challenging the Port Authority's power of eminent domain. The court, however, refused the case. Construction started on August 5, 1966. The site of the World Trade Center started 65 feet below street level. Located so close to the Hudson River, there was the constant threat of water seeping into the construction site. To solve this problem, a slurry wall, which is nicknamed the bathtub, was built which would keep out any unwanted water. It was a very time-consuming process, taking 14 months to build, but it was absolutely necessary before any other construction could begin. In total, 1.2 million cubic yards of material was excavated from the site, which was then used to expand the Manhattan shoreline. In January of 1967, $74 million in contracts was awarded to various steel suppliers, and in the same month Carl Koch was hired to erect the steel from the different suppliers. 1 month after Koch was hired, Tishman Realty and Construction was hired by the Port Authority as the overseer of the construction. Construction for the North Tower began in August of 1968, and construction for the South Tower began 5 months later. The North Tower and the South Tower were completed on December 23, 1970, and July 19, 1971, respectively. The first tenants moved into the World Trade Center in December of 1970, before both of the buildings were even completed. Some of the tenants of the World Trade Center included Cantor Fitzgerald, Marsh & McLennan Companies, Morgan Stanley, and Sandler O'Neill & Partners, as well as many, many more. The buildings finally opened on April 4, 1973. The Twin Towers were criticized for their awkward appearance in comparison to New York City's other buildings. People also made the argument that the superblock that the World Trade Center was built on interrupted New York City's traffic. The makeup and sheer size of the towers resulted in high wind speeds at ground level. The Empire State Building's 40-year reign of being the tallest building in the world had come to an end. The Twin Towers now held the title. Measured from the top of its telecommunications antenna, which was added to the roof in 1978, the North Tower clocked in at a whopping 1,728 feet tall. The South Tower clocked in at 1,362 feet tall. Although now being iconic as the Twin Towers, shortly after their inception at a press conference in 1973, many asked Yamasaki, why two 110-story buildings? Why not one 220-story building? Yamasaki simply responded, I didn't want to lose the human scale. On an average workday, 50,000 people worked in the towers, with an additional 200,000 visitors. Due to the World Trade Center's massive size and overall importance, it earned its very own zip code, 10048. 20 years after its completion, the Twin Towers faced its first threat of destruction in the form of a Ryder truck loaded up with 1,500 pounds of explosives. Ramzi Youssef parked the truck in the underground garage of the North Tower. The blast damaged 5 sublevels and killed 6 people. The plan was to send the North Tower crashing into the South Tower, sort of a two birds with one stone effect. The attack failed, but left the sublevels, which supported the tower's columns, in need of serious repairs. Youssef was arrested 2 years after the attack, during an attempt to flee to Pakistan. Other members related to the attack were also arrested and convicted in the following years. September 11th, 2001 started out like any other day for New York City. The only thing out of the ordinary was the exceptional weather. Everything changed, though, at 8:46 a.m., when a plane, hijacked by terrorists associated with Al-Qaeda, crashed into the northern face of the North Tower of the World Trade Center. The general initial reaction was that it was simply an accident, but 17 minutes later, at 9:03 a.m., everyone knew it wasn't, when a second plane crashed into the South Tower. Nobody will ever forget where they were when they first heard the news.
I was in my home in Palm Desert, California. I had flown virtually all day from my other home in northern Michigan into Palm Springs. Arrived about 1 o'clock in the morning on 9/11 itself, and that was the last plane to come into the Palm Springs airport for a very long time.
The principal came on the PA system and announced what had happened, and they turned it on all the TVs in the school. And my initial reaction was definitely shock. People started panicking in my classroom. There were kids who were, they thought, their parents worked in the city, or there was a couple kids I remember saying, I think my dad or my mom are going to be in the city today, or something like that. But, I knew, because Dad brought us to his office a couple times, so I knew exactly where his office was. And when I saw, where the flames were coming from. I knew what the deal was.
American Airlines Flight 11's impact left 1,344 people trapped in the North Tower with literally no means of escape. United Airlines Flight 175's off-center impact left one stairwell intact, but only a few people managed to successfully pass through it before it collapsed at 9:59 due to weakened support beams and intense fires. After 102 minutes, the North Tower also collapsed, leaving nothing but a plume of smoke and ash.
People have asked me in the past, they're like, why wasn't your dad, so why didn't they save your dad? And I'm like, well, that's just not, it was impossible. Like, it just wasn't possible. Like, if they could have, they would have.
Well, I had multiple reactions and feelings. The first one was shock, I would say. Then fear, anger, and then later on, as I got to wonder about who was directly affected, that brought on some more fear.
Obviously, it was a terrible, terrible tragedy. But the way I view it is that there are many children in this world that don't know their father, that aren't loved by their father, that aren't, that don't get to have the relationship with their father that I did. And so I'm very grateful for the 14 years I had with him because, I never doubted his love for me.
Speaking about my family first, because that's the most personal part of my life. One of my brothers was located very near there. I was concerned about him. Actually, he turned out that he went to over 35 funerals of friends of his, mostly at the Cantor Fitzgerald firm. Another brother of mine, also in the Wall Street business, was in the Lehman building. He was watching people jump out of the buildings from where he was and set up a temporary headquarters. One of the early photographs that was released to the public was of Father Michael Judge, who was the chaplain at the New York City Fire Department. So he had a hard hat on, just like a firefighter. He always wore that when he was with them. But he took it off to deliver the last rites, the sacrament of the last rites. And when he took that hat off, debris from, I think it was One World Trade Center, came flying out, hit him in the head, and killed him.
I didn't really cope for it for a while, and my coping process sort of was spread out along a very long time. And, I played a lot of sports, I had a lot of friends. As for, coping, the most in touch I felt with my feelings regarding it all was the 10-year anniversary. It was Sunday Night Football on September 11th. This was the first year that it was on a Sunday, so they had all the NFL games. They really did a great job of honoring all of it. Was definitely, that's when I realized that I was at peace with all of it.
In total, 2,996 people were killed in the September 11th attack on the World Trade Center and the Pentagon. Plans for rebuilding the World Trade Center began almost immediately after the attack, and a competition was held to determine the designs for the site. In December of 2002, Daniel Libeskind was chosen as the architect for the new World Trade Center. His designs underwent many revisions. In June of 2005, most of Daniel's designs and ideas had been scrapped, and he was replaced by David Childs as the lead architect for the project. The cornerstone of One World Trade Center, also known as the Freedom Tower, was laid on July 4th, 2004, but further construction was put on hold until November 18th, 2006, when 400 cubic yards of concrete were poured onto the foundations of what would be One World Trade Center. 1 month later, the first beams were welded to the building's base, and 1 year after that, the tower's foundations were nearing completion. As the years went on, One World Trade Center grew taller and taller. What started out as a short skeleton of steel grew into a towering monolith that rose high into the Manhattan skyline. Measured from the top of its spire, which topped off on May 2nd of this year, One World Trade Center would reach 1,776 feet into the air, symbolic of the year America declared independence. To better prepare for possible terrorist attacks, the new World Trade Center is equipped with multiple security features, as well as heightened security measures. It will include reinforced stairwells, some of which are to be exclusively used by firefighters, and reinforced elevator shafts, as well as blast-resistant windows. One World Trade Center is also reinforced with a concrete base. All vehicles will be screened before entering the complex, and visitors are currently screened in a similar process to that of airports. The site will also be covered in 400 video surveillance cameras, monitored by the NYPD 24 hours a day. The Freedom Tower will be completed and ready for tenants by the end of 2013. The project cost an estimated $3.8 billion.
It's gone up pretty quickly. It's an enormous building, and the cool thing about it is that they're using a type of cement that is literally indestructible. And it has basically set a precedent for any building that goes up anywhere else in the world. And this building, the new Tower 1, started that. And when you see it, you'll see what I'm talking about. This thing is massive. It is, obviously it's not two buildings, but it's the size of if they combined those two buildings. And it's gonna be the biggest building in this country, you know? And it's gonna be one of the biggest in the world.
Along with the new World Trade Center, the complex would include a memorial dedicated to those killed in the 1993 bombing and the September 11th attack. The design, titled Reflecting Absence, envisioned by architect Michael Arid, was chosen as the winner of the World Trade Center Site Memorial Competition in January of 2004. There were over 5,000 other entries in the contest. The memorial is made up of two pools set in the footprints of the original Twin Tower and a museum. The names of the victims are etched into 76 bronze plates mounted to walls surrounding the perimeter of the pools. The museum is still under construction, and the memorial opened on September 11, 2011. The memorial has served as a place for thought, reflection, and prayer for the millions that have already visited it, and it will continue to do so for the countless millions that have yet to come.